My name is Toke Høye. I'm a senior scientist at the Department of Bioscience in Aarhus University. We're here in the lab where we do the sorting and identification of our insect samples from Greenland. We're doing this project now for the 6th year to study the impacts of climate change on terrestrial organisms like insects and how the abundance and diversity of insect communities change in response to climate change. So we've been doing this the traditional way, and that involves collecting insects in the field in large quantities because we want to understand the spatial and temporal variation in these communities. And we are sorting these insects into taxonomic groups and later identifying them down to the species level. It's quite a tedious process. It takes a long time in the field, but it also takes a substantial amount of time in the lab, and it requires quite considerable expertise, knowledge about these specific organisms, specific traits that allow us to identify them down to the species level. Yeah, so we collect about 2,000 insect samples each season, each summer. And I think roughly we can say it takes about an hour to process one of these samples, and that is to just sort them into broad taxonomic groups. The subsequent identification of the insects down to species level can take anything from yet another hour to maybe even 10 or 20 hours for one sample. And typically this means that we only identify a subset of the specimens that we collect. For some groups, actually there are very few keys or literature support to actually identify these groups. So an automatic system for identification of insects more broadly would be a game changer for that kind of diversity studies. I think it would allow people that had limited expertise in this area to start considering actually going into this kind of work, and it would certainly allow those people with expertise to speed up the process of processing their sample. The broader implications of the system of automatic identification of insects are manifold. One obvious consequence is that we will get this critical knowledge about insect populations that is currently lacking. We see on a global scale that populations of insects are broadly in decline, and we have limited understanding of why that is. So an automatic system would allow people to gather this critical piece of data across ecosystems. We know that insects play critical roles in ecological processes, that is, say, pollination of crops or regulation of pests or transmission of diseases. And the automatic system would help get a better understanding of these processes. It would also allow us to disseminate our information and knowledge about insects to the public, because the automatic detection system would make it possible for us to link with, say, school kids that would come with their insect catches and get information about what they find and where. It would also be an eye-opener for the interface between biology and engineering more broadly, and I think other collaborations could form from that.